Live on exactly, and next online we speak with the executive director of the NICD. He's actually the acting executive director, and that's you, Professor Adrian Puren. Good morning, welcome to the program. And we understand that the Ministerial Advisory Committee has reportedly communicated with the Minister of Health, informing the Health Ministry that there is no longer a need for contact tracing and quarantining as the virus has become endemic. Is that correct? And what does this all mean for the layperson like myself? A very good
All right.
morning and welcome.
Very good morning to you, and thank you for the opportunity. So yes, please note that this is still an advisory to the ministry, and so obviously they would have to review it and the content and decide whether or not that is the appropriate advice they've received and act on it. But what it would mean is that, as you know, anyone that tests PCR positive, for example, goes into isolation. But if a person comes into contact with a person who's either tested positive or is aware that that person's been tested positive, and they feel that they had what is called close contact, in other words, they had maskless contact, close contact less than a meter, then they would initially go into quarantine, observe over a period of 14 days, and if they developed symptoms during that period, they would now have to go and test to see if they had become infected. What this means is that even if you've had this contact, you no longer have to go into quarantine, but obviously you would have to observe, I think, the necessary non-pharmaceutical interventions even under those circumstances. And if you do develop symptoms, you still go and test. And the part of the rationale for this is obviously that there's a large proportion of people who transmit asymptomatically. So you may not know about the infection. The focus, I guess, is also that they would really like to identify severe cases, because that's where the major problems are with our hospitals. Of course, the practicalities of quarantining people, both at, for example, a personal level and the economic level, means that that person, if they have to be at work, now outside of work and cannot fulfill their obligations, they are away from work. And of course, the workplace of itself, if you're now short-staffed because multiple people are in quarantine and they can go on to multiple quarantine periods, it certainly has had an effect. So that's really the main rationale for this particular advisory to the Minister of Health.
Now we're seeing what's happening in the Western world, the UK possibly thinking about going into some form of a conditional lockdown. Parts of Europe are already talking about a pre and a post-Christmas lockdown. Never mind that the citizens are protesting against the lockdowns, etc., during this festive period. We're also hearing from the West that they're into the fifth wave. I'm wondering how it impacts us here in South Africa, because our scientists were the first to have identified the Omicron variant, and that's when we put the word out. We were sadly penalized for it. But be that as it may, we kind of were on top of our game. How do we then move forward? Is there a suggestion there that perhaps we're also, with our, after the summer months, that we're going to be in a similar position as the Western world?
Not necessarily. I think it just depends on the development. We've had very large surges that has contributed, I think, to the immune status of many of our citizens, as well as the fact that we do have a vaccine program. And as you can see, currently we are hoping that in terms of the severity of this, in terms of hospitalizations and death, we will not see that happen, but we always need to be cautious around that. So I think it really depends on what happens after that. In other words, I think you mentioned the word endemicity. In other words, are we starting to adapt to this particular virus, or will this virus continue to evolve? And I think that's always been the challenge, is that without marked vaccine coverage, that risk, I'm afraid, will still remain with us, whether it be in South Africa or outside of South Africa. So I think we still need to be on our guard. So I think although we are starting to adapt our ways of living, I think we still need to be cautious. So in other words, the mask wearing, whether we're inside or outside, I think will still remain with us for a while longer. But I think also getting people vaccinated, I think will also be a very important strategy for us.
That being said, and I ask this to all of the scientists and the health professionals that I talk to on the show, and I guess, COVID and Omicron, these discussions are going to be ongoing for a long, long time to come, and we will still be involved in all of these discussions. But having said that, are we over our fourth wave? Do we see a fifth wave on the horizon, as Europe is suggesting? And then also, you spoke about the disease evolving. Are we going to be seeing this in the coming months? We currently sitting with the Omicron. So if that kind of burns out or wears away or vanishes, whatever happens, are we then going to be seeing newer and newer variants coming along? How prepared are we for all of this? And that being said, isn't it time South Africa seriously thinks about the booster shots, even though the majority of our population hasn't been vaccinated, but for those who have and are willing to take the booster shot, shouldn't that be open to them?
Yes, so you've asked many questions.
Yes, I know.
Answer them. So the fourth wave has not ended yet. We're just in the first, I think, 2 weeks, 3 weeks of the fourth wave. But certainly Gauteng certainly has reached its peak, and therefore the cases will decline. I can't really predict when we will then exit the fourth wave, but all the other provinces are still in the early trajectory of the fourth wave. So we don't know how the duration of that. But certainly it's always difficult to predict what will happen. The virus is in constant evolution regardless of what we do. However, what is critical is that we certainly increase the coverage of vaccination. I think that's really important. Also, consideration around looking at boosters. You're quite correct. That is an important consideration even now that we are in this particular fourth wave. If there are opportunities for us to include boosters, I think we should certainly consider it, but I think we should still really focus on those individuals who have not been vaccinated to adapt to this particular virus. So yes, it's all about readiness and preparedness as well, trying to adapt to ensuring that our economy does start to recover and thrive and people are not as severely affected as they have been and are being affected. So I think these are all important considerations, and preparedness is really, we have this particular virus now, but we need to then think about future pandemics, how do we manage those? So these are all really important questions that you have raised. Thank you for those.
Professor Puren, thank you indeed for always being available to inform us and the general public of what exactly is going on in this space. And we need to hear from you as scientists on an ongoing basis, just to give us the assurance that everything is being done possibly to contain the virus, to be prepared for new and newer variants, and to continue urging us as the public to go out and vaccinate. You go well, stay safe, and until the next time, all the very best for the festive.
Take care. Thank you. Thanks.
That was Professor Adrian Puren from the NICD. He is the acting executive director, talking to us about COVID and, gosh, everything that goes with COVID. All I can say is please, 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 good people, keep safe, social distance, mask up, and sanitize. It is exactly 8:34 a.m.
Freedom Stationery supply